Silence doesn't usually feel loud. But this silence? It's electric, heavy, like the breath right before a storm tears through the roof. The lights are hot, the makeup is settling into the creases of strained expressions, and every single person in that room knows something is about to happen. Not just another tense exchange or awkward smile, something real, something raw. Sukanya leans forward, not aggressively, just firmly, the way someone does when they know the next words out of their mouth will change everything. And Kody? He's trying so hard to keep it all under control, but his nostrils flare, jaw tightens, and his hands are twitching, clasping and unclasping in his lap like he's holding back a scream behind his teeth. She asks a question, simple on the surface. Kody, do you think, maybe, just maybe, you treated them differently? That's it. Not shouted, not accusatory, just calm. But the reaction is nothing short of staggering. His face shifts, slowly at first, from disbelief to offense to something that looks a lot like fury. It's not loud yet, but it's close. And everyone else on that stage? You can feel their bodies draw in a little tighter, shoulders a little tenser, eyes doing that subtle scanning thing, like they're deciding whether to stay seated or get out of the way. This isn't the kind of thing you plan. It builds quietly, then comes all at once. Let's rewind the clock just for a moment, because before this snap, everything looked calm. On the surface, the air in the tell-all set was almost too still, like everyone was trying way too hard to be composed. Christine sat upright, calm but unreadable. Janelle kept her arms folded, that trademark calm intensity on her face. Meri's lips were pressed tight, her eyes already glassy from something no one else was asking about, the kind of unreleased pain that doesn't find words easily. And Robyn, well, she was trying to keep the peace again. You could see it in the way she leaned in toward Kody, like that tiny gesture might anchor him. Sukanya had been trying to stay neutral, but you could tell this wasn't an ordinary interview. It had shifted. She wasn't just asking for the cameras. She wanted real answers. Families had cracked apart. Women had walked away. Viewers were demanding accountability. And finally, so was she. But when she asked that question, the one Kody wasn't ready to hear, everything started to peel back. First, it was the narrowing of his eyes, then the deepening lines across his forehead that signaled frustration he didn't bother hiding. He looked like someone whose truth was slipping from his grasp, who was realizing too late that people weren't afraid of him anymore. You know that moment when someone tries to stay composed, but their breathing gives them away? That happens. Kody inhales sharply, but it staggers near the top of his chest, like everything inside him is being squeezed. Sukanya watches it happen and doesn't flinch. She doesn't soften or backpedal. That's when you know this moment is different. She's not playing around. She's standing there, keeping eye contact, asking the kind of questions these wives have wanted to ask but couldn't, and someone finally dares to do it for them. He blurts out a name, not even in context, just raw emotion. Christine. That's the target. You can almost predict it. And instantly, Christine's eyes don't shift. She's been through this too many times. She's not shocked anymore, just resigned. The chaos in him? That's his to carry now. And still, his voice isn't raised. Not yet. But the temperature is changing. He shifts in his seat. Robyn leans toward him to whisper something, maybe to calm him, maybe to warn him. We don't hear it, but it changes nothing. His body jerks slightly, straightening in defiance. And then his head pivots, eyes narrowing straight at Sukanya, and his voice cracks through the quiet. I'm sick of being painted as the villain. Sharp, loud, like glass, his voice finally breaks free. And just like that, it's no longer tension. It's confrontation. The kind you don't rewind or mute, the kind that echoes across screens, across households that have been watching this family fall apart piece by piece for over a decade. Christine's brow lifts, ever so subtly. Janelle closes her eyes just for a beat, like something inside her settles into place. Meri visibly tenses. And Robyn? Her lips part, but the words don't come. This is it. The moment everyone's been waiting for. The snap. The unraveling. The truth no longer protected by quiet. And all Sukanya does is listen. Eyes steady, hands still folded, because she knows what's coming next isn't going to be calm. It's going to be raw. And once it starts, there's no stopping it. The quiet didn't start in that studio. It started before the cameras rolled, before the makeup chair, before Kody's words erupted like steam from a pipe that held pressure for far too long. It started last episode, the one where simmering emotions turned ice cold. If you watched closely, the slow collapse wasn't sudden. It was deliberate. Across seasons, but especially in that last hour, piece by piece, this once sprawling plural family felt like strangers circling the same fire, each one colder than the last. Christine was the one who lit the first real match. Her brave confession, sitting across from Sukanya, steady voice but moist eyes, changed everything. "I wasn't valued," she said, and she meant it. Years of effort, swallowed disappointment, and staying silent out of duty. Gone. What hit hardest wasn't that she left. It's how firm she stood in leaving. No hesitation, just truth. And for the first time, she didn't sound like someone asking for understanding. She sounded like someone who no longer needed his permission to be free. Janelle, in her quiet resilience, followed suit. Different tone, same clarity. Her words didn't aim to hurt, but her absence speaks volumes. She didn't storm out, she stepped away, because she got tired of speaking to someone who only listened when agreeing. And when she admitted last episode that holidays had felt like obligations, not celebrations, jaws dropped. Because when she, the most grounded, objective, peacemaking wife, says she feels forgotten, that's not drama, that's devastation. Then came Meri, always the quiet one, always hoping, watching from the outside, loving loudly in silence while Kody never looked back. Her face, when replaying her old confessions, was hard to forget. A mix of sorrow, strength, and surrender. She wasn't angry, she was done. The Meri who once told him she'd wait forever? She didn't say that this time. Now she watches from the edge of the couch, shoulders back, but something in her posture says, "I gave everything, and none of it mattered." And then there's Robyn, sitting beside Kody in this tell-all like she's bracing against the wind, the only legal wife left. But even she seems unsteady. Her eyes dart toward him more than they used to, her tone softer but laced with nervous hesitations. Fans noticed. This wasn't the confident, leaned-in Robyn from early seasons. This was someone gripping tight to a version of the family already gone. And maybe, deep down, she knows it too. If anyone's been watching The Wives, they'd see none of them lean in when he speaks anymore. They catch each other's eyes. They nod quietly. They validate each other. That unity? That invisible tether that once linked all sister wives through love and loyalty, no matter how strained? It's gone. But something new replaced it. A different alliance. Built not around a shared husband, but a shared pain. And maybe that's what Kody felt before he broke. You could read it all over him. Every gesture, the bouncing heel, the fingers drumming the armrest, the flaring nostrils paired with forced smirks. He didn't come here defeated, not at first. He came here angry, certain, frustrated by what he framed as betrayal. He thought he'd get to tell his side, explain himself, win some ground back. But the weight of 4 divided women, each carrying years of hurt and unmet needs, pressed into the room with an intensity even he hadn't calculated. What ate at him wasn't just the divorce, or Janelle saying she felt separated. It was that the narrative had flipped, that somewhere, through the long seasons and broken promises, he lost control of the story. And now it's his wives telling it, together. And in the studio, as Sukanya sits across from him, composed, firm, unblinking, she becomes for that one moment the voice of every viewer, every forgotten spouse, every silent Meri. She tilts her head slightly, matches his intensity without raising hers, and asks the question that lands like a blade so sharp no one breathes. "Do you think you're angry because you lost control? or because they stopped trying to make you feel in charge? That pause right after? That's not silence, that's shock. That's disbelief turning into fire. Kody's shoulders roll stiffly. He exhales like he's trying to bring the calm back, but his hand, clenched so tight his knuckles go white, says he's already losing it. This isn't about who stayed. It's about the fact they're not afraid anymore. And that's the scariest thing of all. Not being left. Being exposed. His voice didn't rise all at once. It cracked first. Then it shook. And then, like something inside of him burst open, it exploded out of his mouth, fully formed, harsh and wild. I sacrificed for this family. I did everything, and they just threw it back in my face. The room didn't shake, but it felt like it should have. It was the kind of emotional eruption that stops time. Everyone froze. For a beat too long, the set turned into something else. Not a TV show, not a reunion, not even a tell-all. It turned into the very heart of years of private resentment stretched across dozens of episodes and hundreds of moments. And now, it was boiling over on national television. Sukanya didn't flinch. That was the first thing people noticed. Her posture stayed straight, her face calm, eyebrows slightly raised not in shock, but in acknowledgement. She let him speak. She gave space for whatever storm needed to pass. But her silence wasn't passive. It was deliberate, a quiet challenge, a refusal to meet chaos with chaos. That stillness held more power than if she'd shouted back. Kody leaned forward. His face was red, blotchy even, forehead tight, his hands pointed in sharp jabs, the tone of his voice sudden and desperate. He wasn't explaining anymore. He was imploding. I'm the one who was always trying. You think it's easy dealing with everyone's feelings? You think it's fair what they did to me? I'm the one who gave, and I'm the villain now? Really? No one responded. They didn't need to. Christine sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on nowhere. Not on him, not on Sukanya, just far enough away to show that she wasn't engaging. It wasn't resistance, it was survival. She had heard that anger before. She had lived in it. There was nothing new for her to react to. Janelle looked down, not in shame, not in defeat, just a tiny shake of her head, like she was quietly affirming to herself that walking away had been right. Her silence wasn't discomfort, it was peace. Robyn pressed her hand lightly against Kody's knee, not forceful, not commanding, just enough to say, "Please stop." She whispered something close to his ear. The microphones didn't pick it up, but people watching at home could guess. Maybe breathe, maybe calm down, maybe you're scaring them. Whatever it was, it didn't land. His posture stiffened further, as if even her touch felt like pressure he didn't want. And Meri? She didn't move. Her face was unreadable, the way someone looks when their whole body is numb. Not from surprise, but from reaching the end of caring. And that made it even more chilling, because after everything, after the catfishing scandal, after the cold distance, after every moment where her presence was nothing more than tolerated, not even this sparked emotion from her anymore. He stood up. Not far, not leaving, just enough for his voice to tower in the space. They never tried. They only wanted me when it was easy, when I was giving everything. But the second I asked for loyalty, they bailed. Sukanya finally moved. She slowly lowered the tablet in her lap, placed it on the chair beside her. She leaned forward, locking eyes with him for the first time since the screaming began. Her voice, steady as ever. Kody, no one here said you didn't give, but they're saying they gave too. And somewhere in there, all of you lost each other. He didn't have an answer for that. Not a clean one, not something rehearsed, not something that would put the blame back on someone else without sounding hollow. For the first time, he didn't shout, he didn't nod. He just stood there, shoulders heaving slowly, as if the energy that drove the outburst had finally started to burn out. Not into apology, just into silence. The kind of silence that weighs more than words. Christine finally looked toward him. Her mouth didn't open. She didn't shake her head. But the look said it all. This is who I've been trying to show the world. It was crystal clear now. The rage was real, the hurt was deep, but so was the control that once masked it, and that mask had just shattered. Janelle crossed her arms, pressing her lips tighter. Whatever was coming next, she wasn't afraid of it. Meri blinked slowly. Still no reaction. And Robyn, she looked heartbroken, confused, but not surprised. And then, nothing. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The tension didn't break, it froze, hung in the air like unfinished business. Because everyone in that room seemed to realize the same thing at the same time. This explosion wasn't the end. It was a warning. Sukanya shifts in her seat again, calm but deliberate, and the moment she speaks, the tension in the room doubles back on itself, not louder but tighter. "Kody," she says carefully, "there's been a lot of talk, years of it really, about favoritism, about how Robyn received something different from you. Do you think those claims were unfair?" It's not an accusation. It's not even worded with bite. But the impact is immediate. Kody's face stiffens. Robyn straightens her back like she knew this was coming. And Christine, her eyes flick down briefly, like even hearing the question bruises something inside her that still hasn't healed all the way. Kody opens his mouth, but nothing comes out for a second. The hesitation doesn't look like confusion, it looks like panic. He starts shaking his head, disbelief thick in his expression. Then, quietly murmuring at first, he tries to speak the way politicians do. Calculated, careful, like he's trying to talk over the emotion instead of through it. "That's not true," he says. "It's just not true. I had relationships with all of them. I cared about all of them." But Robyn is already fidgeting. She leans forward to speak, not over him but with him, loud enough that the whole room hears it. "He tried. He really tried. You have to understand, it was never about favoritism. It was about what was working and what wasn't. We were still figuring things out." The words are soft, almost apologetic, but the energy shifts instantly. Because Christine doesn't let that one go. She doesn't yell. She doesn't even look angry. But the way she speaks, it stops everything from moving. "It wasn't about what was working," she says, voice clear but laced with years of hurt. "It was always about what you were willing to fight for. You were willing to fight for Robyn. You showed up for her. You defended her. You protected her. You moved heaven and earth for her. And not once did I feel like you did that for me." And just like that, the room breathes differently. There's a long pause after Christine finishes, and no one dares to interrupt it. Her voice didn't shake, but everything else about her, her posture, her hands mostly still in her lap, her expression locked in quiet resolve, it all screamed pain. The kind no one can fake, the kind that steals energy. Kody turns toward her, as if preparing to argue, but before he does, he glances at Janelle. For whatever reason, in that moment, some part of him looks for her approval, her agreement, her validation. But she doesn't give it. She's staring at the floor, eyes narrowed, not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from watching someone explain themselves over and over when the reality is sitting plain on the table. Meri, meanwhile, doesn't blink. She looks like someone who just heard something she's thought for years but never dared say out loud. There's disbelief in her eyes, not at the situation, at the truth of it. Maybe she always knew. Maybe she finally sees how obvious it was to everyone else. And then, Robyn wipes away a tear. She whispers again, but it's uncertain this time. "It wasn't supposed to be this way." Sukanya leans in just a little, calm, measured, unwavering. Her voice is quiet, but it cuts. She's not playing defense anymore. She's not carefully walking around egos or validation. She's standing on solid ground now, and when she speaks, it's with a clarity that no one escapes. "Why do you think everyone saw it except you? Why, for all these years, did every wife feel second, while Robyn never did?" Kody shifts uncomfortably. His leg bounces, his hands twitch, his neck tightens, shoulders tense. He looks between them all now, but none of them are crying. No one is backing down. They're holding their own silence, And that silence isn't broken. It's earned. Chinese is looking down again, but not in shame. She's looking at the space between her feet like she's holding something there. The weight of knowing she gave up decades of herself for someone who still doesn't see why she left. Robyn tries to reach for his hand, quietly and with hesitation. He doesn't pull away, but he doesn't reach back either. And then Sukanya, still steady, utters the sentence that sends another crack through the already breaking ceiling. "Were you ever fair to them?" His shoulders tense so sharply it's visible. He's breathing faster now, blinking more often, and this time, he doesn't answer right away. And for the first time in that entire segment, he looks unsure, like the truth finally got too close. All of the movement in the room stopped at once. No shifting, no glancing, no whispers. Just a stillness that pressed against the walls like gravity got heavier. And sitting there, eyes forward, hands resting gently in her lap, Christine finally spoke. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't crack, it didn't apologize. It came out calm, certain, ice cool. And behind that cold calm was heat that had been simmering for almost 30 years. "You only loved me when I obeyed." 5 words. That's all it took to fracture whatever illusion was left floating in that space between Kody and his wives. No shouting, no build-up, just a perfectly placed knife of honesty, delivered without rage, but with all the weight of a woman who waited too long to be seen. Kody's head snapped toward her the moment the words hit the air. It wasn't just shock, it was disbelief that someone would actually say it. That particular truth had always lived under the surface, pulsing through interactions, buried in sentences left unfinished, caught in the tight smiles and forced calendar arrangements. But to hear it spoken aloud, in that room, so plain and unflinching, it pulled the oxygen right out of the conversation. He didn't respond right away. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. What came next wasn't an explanation. It wasn't even controlled. "That's a lie," he blurted out, eyes wide, voice sharp. "You're twisting things. You were always pulling away from me. Don't sit there and act like I didn't try." But Christine didn't budge. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself with a list of wrongs or receipts. She just blinked, slow and deliberate, like Kody's explosion was noise she had learned to live around. This wasn't the same Christine who forced herself to smile through family functions or took up less space in conversations so he wouldn't get irritated. That Christine is long gone. This Christine? She wasn't proving anything. She was stating facts. And Meri, the way Meri turned her head when Christine said those words, that moment lasted longer than anything spoken. It was as if Christine had reached across the space between them and dragged out something that Meri hadn't found the nerve to express. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. She just stared at Christine with wide eyes, and not in disagreement, in awe. Janelle, meanwhile, looked right at Kody, not sideways, not out of the corner of her eye. A full-on, level stare. Not hostile, not angry, just incredibly tired. When Christine's words settled into the silence, Janelle gave the faintest nod. A small gesture, but filled with meaning. Like she was saying, "Yes, that's what I've been trying to describe. That's exactly it." And Robyn, well, Robyn looked devastated. Her hands clenched together tightly in her lap. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. She kept darting her eyes between Christine and Kody, like watching a car crash she couldn't prevent, but felt completely responsible for. Eventually, she shook her head. Not in disagreement with Christine's words, but as if trying to unhear them. Like if she blinked enough, it would go away. But the words didn't go away. They echoed in that space, loud even in the silence. "You only loved me when I obeyed." That's not resentment. That's revelation. That's a curtain being pulled back on years of compliance disguised as consent, of emotional loyalty being traded for moments of conditional kindness. Kody stood. Again, his hands clenched, rage visible in his stance, but this time something else had slipped through behind his eyes. Hurt. Not reflection, not apology, just the sting of being cornered by a truth he'd never admitted to himself, but maybe always sensed. Christine didn't look at him. She didn't even look up. She spoke her truth and let it land wherever it needed to, and the energy in that circle changed. For the first time in years, even with their history, even with their pain, Christine, Meri, and Janelle were aligned. Not in strategy, not even in friendship yet, but in silent understanding. They had all experienced versions of this, being loved on condition, being seen only when convenient. Sukanya kept watching Kody. Her body was still, but her eyes moved between every woman, like a radar quietly tracking the shift in power. She knew what had just happened. The ground under him changed. He wasn't the center anymore. Then she looked at Janelle and asked simply, "Did you feel the same?" Janelle didn't answer. Not right away. Her silence wasn't hesitance. It was the kind of silence that comes before a confession that's held too long. Janelle sat still for a long time. Too long. The kind of stillness that makes you wonder if she's going to say anything at all. But silence isn't the same thing as hesitation with Janelle. She wasn't frozen. She was choosing her words like a scalpel, not a hammer. And when she finally began to speak, the entire room leaned in without realizing it. Unlike Kody, her voice didn't shake. She didn't flail with emotion or try to overpower anyone with volume. She spoke like someone who had waited years, decades even, to finally be heard properly. And once it began, you could feel the shift around her. She wasn't asking for space, she was taking it. "I spent years making excuses," she said, slow, steady, almost too quiet at first. "I told myself you were under pressure, that leading a family like this meant sacrifice, that maybe you were cold because you were exhausted, that maybe if I stayed loyal, if I kept the peace, eventually I'd matter." The last words landed like anchors in the silence. Not tearful, not angry, just true. Christine blinked slowly, her jaw tightening, her eyes warming in a way that wasn't pity. It was something deeper. Recognition. Robyn glanced sideways, barely breathing, and pressed a hand to her mouth. Her eyes were glassy again, only this time it wasn't about defending anything. She looked like someone processing something she'd never wanted to see. Meri had her eyes on the floor, but they weren't empty. If anything, she looked like she was trying not to cry. And if you know Meri's history in this family, that says enough. Because hearing someone else speak the pain she lived in silence is often harder than saying it yourself. Kody didn't interrupt. He just blinked faster, his body stiffening visibly. He wasn't looking right at her. He looked somewhere just past her, like maybe it'd hurt less if he saw through her instead of listening to her. "I told myself it was for the kids," Janelle said, tapping her fingers together in a rhythm that barely betrayed how hard her heart was probably racing. "That if I held on long enough, you'd notice I was still here. But eventually, I realized something. I was raising kids alone in a marriage that called itself plural, and every time I shared my hurt, you told me I was choosing the wrong team." A gasp echoed lightly from behind the set. Someone from production caught off guard. Fans online didn't miss it either. One tweet that exploded minutes after this aired read, "This was Janelle's moment. That one sentence hit deeper than the entire season." Another said, "She didn't yell, she didn't cry, but every word carved truth into bone." Janelle went quiet after that, but her silence wasn't empty. It was the kind of lingering finality that doesn't need a follow-up. She wasn't here for debate. She wasn't asking permission to feel this way. She was laying down something that couldn't be taken back. Christine looked over and gave her the smallest nod. Not performative, not camera-ready, just an honest, human connection shared between two women who were once sister wives, but now something different. Something bonded not by shared marriage but shared survival. Kody sat stiffly, his hands clenched white around his knees, still rocking slightly in his chair. There were words forming behind his lips, but nothing rose. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Sukanya, still calm, attentive, and grounded in that chair across from the circle, gave Janelle her moment entirely. She didn't interrupt, didn't jump in with a follow-up, didn't break the silence too quickly. It was one of the strongest parts of the special. She let the wound breathe in the open. Then, quietly, she turned to Meri. If you were watching closely, you'd see Meri brace. A small shift in her limbs, a quick set of her jaw. She knew this was coming. Everyone did. And Sukanya, not breaking her gentle rhythm, spoke in that same voice that had undone everyone else so far. Soft, but surgical. Meri, after hearing everything just now, are you still holding on to hope? The question didn't come with malice. It wasn't framed to cut. But in that moment, it cracked something anyway. And around her, they waited. Because what Meri said next would finally reveal whether she was still the one left sitting in the shadow or ready to step into the truth. Meri didn't speak right away. She looked straight ahead, not at Sukanya, not at the camera, and not even at the man sitting just a few feet from her who used to call her his everything. There was a pause long enough to make everyone else uncomfortable. For a moment, even Christine shifted slightly in her seat. But Meri wasn't stalling. She was choosing to answer on her terms, in her time, without panic, without performance. "I know what it looks like," she said finally, her voice soft but sure. "It looks like I stayed too long, like I waited for someone who made it clear, over and over, that he'd already let me go." Kody's head turned quickly, like he'd never heard her say these words, even after all these years. But she didn't meet his eyes. She kept hers focused somewhere in between the center of the stage and the floor, as if reliving every hard moment was playing right there in front of her. "I was the first wife, the one who took the leap when this life was still just a hope, back when love felt like love, not competition, not silence, not fear of being forgotten." Her words weren't dressed up in bitterness. They weren't pointed like Christine's or edged like Janelle's. They were soaked in something heavier. Sorrow. The kind that lingers for years until it starts to feel normal. "The loneliest part," she continued, voice still steady, maybe steadier than even she expected. "It wasn't that he stopped loving me. It was that he pretended he still did. For a while. And when he finally admitted he didn't want to try..." She paused, her breath hitching slightly. "Part of me felt relief, that I could finally stop begging someone to make space for me in his heart." The room didn't move, not even Robyn, not even the cameras panning slowly across their faces. Silence had returned, but this one was filled to the brim. Christine looked down again, her hand resting over her stomach like the ache didn't belong just in her heart. Janelle had her eyes closed for a second, her grip tightening around her wrist in thought. Kody looked stunned, truly stunned, for possibly the first time on that stage. His body was turned entirely toward her now, his jaw slightly slack. Whatever anger or positioning he'd clung to earlier in the conversation, it was gone. He wasn't angry now. He was exposed, unprepared. "You used to tell me I was strong," Meri said, finally looking straight at him. "You'd say, 'Meri, you're so independent, I don't have to worry about you.' But it wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal, a way to leave me alone without guilt." Each word dug deeper, not because it was loud, but because it felt real. Fans later posted online, stunned. Meri didn't yell once. She didn't need to. She spoke like a woman who survived a slow disappearance. Another tweet. "That was the most honest thing Meri's ever said on this show. She told the truth, even when it hurt her more than anyone." Kody shifted again in his seat, clearly trying to break the tension he couldn't control for the first time in a long time. But even his silence was loud. He looked like he wanted to say something, but every word had already passed him by. Meri's lips shook, but she didn't let it fold into a full cry. She lifted her chin instead, holding herself the way someone only can after walking alone for years. "I stayed because I believed there was still something worth fixing," she said, "until I realized I was the only one holding a hammer." And with that, she stopped. She didn't need to keep going. Sukanya, visibly moved now, nodded slowly. She didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it linger for a moment longer, out of respect. Then the camera cut to Robyn. Her face trembled. She pressed her lips together hard to stop them from quivering. The tears were already there, waiting, fighting for release. Her hands moved to her lap as she started to shift forward. Because whatever just happened, Robyn couldn't stay quiet anymore. Robyn sat suspended in that moment, holding it all in like she'd done so many times before. Tight shoulders, trembling hands in her lap, eyes glistening but locked in place. Until finally, the dam broke. She looked around the room, eyes darting from Christine to Meri to Janelle, stopping on Kody for just a heartbeat. And then, through tears, she began to speak. "I never wanted this," she said, her voice cracking halfway through. "I never wanted to be the reason everything fell apart." It wasn't the usual composed, practiced way she used to defend the family. This time, the words fell out unstructured, like she was thinking and breaking at the same time. There was no script, no speech, no clear point she was trying to win. Just the panic and grief of someone who saw everything crumbling and couldn't pull it back into order, no matter how hard she tried. "You all think I came in and ruined it, but I was trying to survive too," she continued, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "I walked into something that was already fragile, already full of hurt. And yes, he loved me differently, maybe more freely, but I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't take him from you." Her voice dropped on that last line, like even she wasn't fully sure of it. Christine looked across the space between them, and this time, she didn't look away. Her gaze wasn't cold. It wasn't even bitter. It was quiet understanding, and some part of her, deep down, might have believed Robyn didn't ask for it. But she still accepted it. And that, more than anything, was the betrayal. Janelle's eyebrows twitched slightly, her mouth pulling into a neutral line. You could feel she was holding something back, maybe sympathy, maybe disappointment, maybe both. Meri didn't move. Her eyes were fixed firmly on the floor again, but her defensive wall had come back up fast. The window that cracked open while she spoke was now sealed tight. Robyn's tears weren't washing away her years of silence. Not this time. Robyn's breathing quickened as she kept talking, trying to explain too much all at once. "People say I stole him. I manipulated everything. But you don't know what it's like to constantly feel hated for being chosen. It wasn't a victory. It was a curse. I lost them while gaining him. And some days, it doesn't even feel like a win." Viewers had strong reactions to that line. Online, they lit up, some with empathy, others with disbelief. One fan tweeted, "This is the most honest Robyn's ever been, but it's 10 years too late." Another said, "She's crying because the power structure broke and now she's scared. That's not vulnerability, that's fear of losing control." And someone else simply wrote, "This was her unraveling, and she still didn't say, 'I'm sorry.'" Robyn inhaled sharply, hands now shaking as she gripped her knees. "I watched you all walk away from him," she whispered, "and I felt like I had to protect him. I had to hold what was left. I didn't know what else to do." Her voice was barely audible by the end. These weren't tears from a place of spectacle. These were the tears of someone whose truth had been held inside for too long, and now? The release wasn't liberating, it was heavy, sticky, complicated. Because yes, it was clear she loved him, and yes, maybe she didn't start the breakdown, but she also didn't fight hard enough to stand with them, back when her voice might have made a difference. And that's why the audience was torn. The pain was real, but the damage was real too. Sukanya leaned forward again, this time gentler than ever, but still unwavering. The tears didn't stop her. If anything, they brought her next question even closer to the surface. Her voice anchored the room back in place with 5 quiet words. "Then why didn't you stop it?" Not loud, not sharp, just simple and devastating. Robyn froze. So did the others. Christine's chin dropped a bit, eyes flaring. Janelle finally looked at Robyn again. Meri blinked slowly. Kody's breath caught in his throat. Everything that needed to be said was now hanging in the air. 4 wives sat still, and not one of them spoke. There was nowhere left to hide. Not behind Robyn's tears, not behind old patterns, not behind the idea that loyalty was still intact. Sukanya's question hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Why didn't you stop it? And in the oldest habit he knew how to reach for, Kody paused. Not because he was thinking through an answer, but because he was calculating how much of the truth he could say out loud without losing the last thread of trust. But then he said it. It slipped. Maybe he didn't realize he said it. Maybe that was the truest part of all. "Because I thought they'd come back." Silence. And not the kind that waits politely, not the kind that respects tension. This was the kind of silence that made your stomach drop, because somewhere deep inside, everyone knew what that sentence meant. After all the tears, after the heartbreak, after Christine packed up her life, after Janelle said she was done, after Meri stood in front of him and said he let her go, he still didn't believe they would leave. He didn't think they really meant it, because obedience had worked before. Christine looked up so sharply the shift could have been mistaken for anger. But it wasn't rage, it was disbelief. Then, without skipping a beat, she said what millions of heads were screaming at the screen. "You didn't fight for us because you thought we'd stay anyway." It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. And finally, his eyes met hers, and this time they didn't divert. He looked at Christine, not like someone preparing a defensive line, but like someone who had been exposed mid-thought. She saw right through him, and so did everyone else. Fans watching from their homes erupted across social media. "He said it out loud! He never believed they'd walk!" This should be clipped and replayed forever. That one line? That was the film strip breaking in real time. I've never seen someone implode with one sentence the way Kody just did. And maybe the scariest thing was, he didn't correct it. He didn't rush to explain or soften it or frame it in careful language. He just sat there, blinking slowly, like he couldn't believe it either. Robyn leaned in, waiting for him to say more. Her hand nervously hovered near his, but she didn't take it. For once, even she couldn't shield him from what everyone else had just heard. Christine leaned slightly toward Sukanya and said softly, "That's what we were all waiting for him to admit what we already knew." And when you looked around that studio, no one was surprised, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Janelle's shoulders dropped, like that one sentence validated years of second-guessing herself. She didn't speak, but her face told the story. "You never believed I'd walk either." And Meri? She didn't flinch. Maybe because she had stopped expecting clarity a long time ago. But the look in her eyes was cold now, detached. Not cruel, just final. This wasn't the ending Kody ever expected. In his mind, they'd come back around. They had to. The revolving door was always open. He'd say his version of sorry, hold his position, and eventually one of them would return to orbit. But now, the door was closed. And they weren't revolving anymore. They had just walked straight through. Sukanya didn't react with surprise. Instead, she let the silence settle again. She'd spoken enough. The truth had done the work this time. Then she asked the final question. "What happens next, Kody?" He shifted in his seat again, and for the first time all night he didn't have a script, not even a shaky one. He looked toward the camera, then back at his wives. "I don't know," he said, slower than anything he'd said all season. "I guess I'll be watching like everyone else." It wasn't humble, it wasn't even honest, but it was uncertain, and maybe that was as close to real as he could get. And just like that, the mood shifted. The pain was still there, but now it felt like the end of a storm. Everything soaked, everything raw, but the clouds finally moving. No warm reunion, no fake makeup, but something had changed. Because next season, they're not trying to fix what was. They're building whatever comes next, without him. The stage never felt so quiet. No yelling, no tears, no interruptions. Just the stillness that comes after everything's been said, and there's nowhere left to run. The kind of silence that doesn't beg for more drama, but lets the weight of everything settle in your chest like bricks. One by one, the women sit back in their chairs, not defeated, not even tired, changed. Their faces don't match the same expressions they wore when they first sat down at the start of this tell-all. Now, their eyes carry something else entirely. Resolve. Not in opposition to Kody, but in clarity about who they are without him. Christine straightens her shoulders just a little more than usual, her expression calm. There's no pride or triumph in her look, just truth. The kind of quiet confidence that only comes when you leave something you thought you couldn't survive without, and realize you're better for it. She left before the world expected her to, but now it's painfully clear. She left before the damage became irreversible. Janelle shifts next, breathing deeper. Her face is composed, not hard, not soft, but clear. If there's sadness, it's old. It's burned down to ash. She knows who she is now. There's security in her silence. She speaks volumes without saying much at all, because after all these years of trying to hold the center of a family that kept pulling apart, she finally let go and found her balance. Meri barely moves, but her silence is no longer compliance. It's a boundary now. You can see it. No more leaning toward hope that doesn't reach back. No more staying put in a space that refuses to welcome her in. She doesn't need permission to move on. She doesn't even need closure. She already gave herself that. Robyn watches everything. You can see her fighting with herself, between defending what's left and mourning what's gone. Her hands pressed together tightly, like she's unsure where she fits now that the dynamic has shifted. She got what she wanted once, but the cost? It's here now, and no one is pretending not to see it. And then there's Kody, still sitting, still watching, but no longer leading. No outbursts, no desperate explanations, no pointed fingers. He doesn't have the same fire in his voice anymore, because the scorched ground around him speaks louder than anything he could say. This isn't the man from earlier seasons, the one who stormed into scenes, self-assured, in control, flanked by wives trying to make space for themselves around him. That version is gone. What's left is someone alone in the seat where he'd once been surrounded, and not because anyone forced him there, but because he made the choices that led to this moment. One decision at a time, one silence too long, one pillar too ignored. Until now, the structure he tried to hold together has clearly moved on without him. Sukanya doesn't say much at the end. She doesn't need to. Her presence throughout this special wasn't about stirring drama. It was about asking the questions no one had dared before. And now, with her hands folded gently in front of her and her eyes on the cast, she lets that final silence linger. It says more than any follow-up or outro ever could. The lights don't fade quickly. The camera doesn't cut away. It lingers. On the space between Christine's departure, on the finality in Meri's silence, on the calm in Janelle's breathing, and the uncertainty still clinging to Robyn like a shadow. Kody doesn't move. It's not a punishment, it's a portrait. A man watching the consequences of never seeing the people who needed to be seen. And maybe the most poetic part of it all? He finally stopped talking. He finally sat still long enough to feel the absence, to realize that silence isn't always respect. Sometimes it's the sound of being done. This is how it ends, for now. Not with a single blow-up, not with yelling or walking off set, but with each woman reclaiming her voice, with the years of missed chances laid bare for every viewer, every fan, every heartbroken witness who saw themselves in one, or maybe all, of those wives. The story isn't over because people like this don't disappear quietly. But the season that's been building for over a decade, this chapter is finished. And whatever happens next, it won't look like what came before. Here's the question. After everything you just saw, if you were one of them, would you have stayed? Or is walking away the only real freedom left? Tell me in the comments, because this one deserves a truth of its own.